Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining our session today. My name is Douglas. I'll be your host for the day. It's good seeing you. For those who are joining us for the first time, welcome so much to our community. This is the Expert Bytes community, and what we do is we get experts from different fields, get to hear from them, learn from them. And our session today, we are going to look at software engineering, but regarding people, processes, and systems. So we already have our two guests in the house, and they are going to share with us the expertise. We have a very handsome gentleman by the name Noel, and a very pretty lady known as Gladys. In as far as they are good looking, they're also brilliant and smart, and we are going to hear from them. So if this is your first time joining us, you can invite your friend to learn with you as well, and also subscribe to our YouTube community. So I'd give you 30 seconds to subscribe to our YouTube community and also allow our speakers settle in. So 30 seconds, then we are good to go. Okay, good. So thank you for subscribing to our learning community. Once again, welcome so much. I know we are very eager to hear from our panelists today. So I'll allow them to say a word before we start off and read their formal profile. So, Noel, how are you?
I am doing well. Thank you for this opportunity, by there, Douglas. Yeah, you mentioned about how we met. Very interesting, and it's been years. So, briefly, my name is Noel Kipyegon. Experience. I have experience of over 8 years working on the Microsoft space, especially on the Dynamics areas. Developing systems has been my work, and at least managing some projects and implementation of these projects. So far the experience is going on well. I began my company, so I'm a founder of DynaCloud Africa. DynaCloud Africa is based in Kenya, uh, getting quite a number of clients on various sectors, especially on government institutions. We have law firms as well as some logistics companies. So far, the experience is good. Learning day in, day out. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Noel. Um, then we also have Gladys. Gladys, karibu sana, tusalimie. Let's hear your voice.
Thank you so much, Douglas. Hi, Noel. Nice to meet you once again. So my name is Gladys Mumbi Wairere. I am a product manager, and in comparison to my companion, Noel, I think I am still kind of a newbie in the tech space, but I believe I'm trying to be well versed in the product management space. So I have an experience of 1 year in product management, but a general experience of 2 years in the tech space. So 1 year in product design and then another year in product management. And I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much for the invite. It's always a pleasure being on your show, Douglas.
Okay, thank you. So, to our audience and our online community, those are our two guests for our session today. And as you've heard, they are so much into tech and what they've been doing generally. Their day-to-day processes entail meeting users, working on systems, and also the processes they are in. You'll allow me to read their formal professional bio as we get into the session. Again, remember, if you are new to our channel, you can subscribe, join us, share our channel, share what we do, help us grow our learning community. If you have questions, we also have a chat box on the live page. You can drop it either to Noel or to Gladys, depending on who you want to address or tackle your specific question. So, welcome.
Mhm.
So I'll start off with Noel. Noel, thank you so much for setting aside time to be part of us today. Noel Kipyegon is a founder of DynaCloud Africa, as he has mentioned. He's the CEO there. Noel is also a seasoned IT consultant and a systems architect with over 8 years of experience delivering innovative, scalable, and digital solutions across Africa, both in the public sector and also the private sector. He has also specialized in Microsoft Dynamics 365, as you've heard, the Power Platform by Microsoft, and the ERP systems. He also does integrations that help organizations streamline their operations, enhance stakeholder management, and every other thing around data-driven decisions. His work spans mission-critical platforms from investment and portfolio management systems to citizen case management systems, portals, and every other thing entailing ERP systems. He also does collaborations with global institutions like the World Bank, the USAID, and various government bodies. You can get his public profile on LinkedIn because he's done quite a lot with the 8 years. But also beyond his technical expertise, Noel is also a passionate mentor. He also is passionate about building communities for those who are likely looking for mentors. You can reach out to Noel. He's committed to using technology as a force for social good, which is a good thing, Noel. So whether guiding transformation roadmaps or you are a small medium enterprise looking for investments digitally, he can also guide you in terms of how you can access that. Yes, Noel remains clear in terms of his focus, enabling impact through smart, secure, and human-centered solutions. Remember, human-centered solutions is one of the things we are going to look at today. So Noel, karibu sana. You can show some love for Noel in the chat box on YouTube with some claps as you welcome him. Asante sana, Noel.
Mhm.
Okay, on to Gladys. Gladys is a product manager. She has mentioned that. She's very passionate about building digital solutions that simplify our day-to-day life. Possibly, we've somehow used one of her products, maybe directly or indirectly, because she works at Equity Bank, where she leads the development of payments, of course, beyond banking solutions, value-added services, which act as a bridge between technology, business, and customer needs. Gladys has a background in product design and a deep interest in user experience. Good. So if you also want to know Gladys beyond work, she also enjoys writing about product management on LinkedIn. So you can search her on LinkedIn and see what she has so far written. I'm also a reader of what she writes, which is a good thing. Again, she loves exploring creativity through cooking. So for the foodies in the house, you must be very happy. I don't know, Noel, if you are a foodie, but now we have a foodie in the house. So yes, it's a
Lumpy.
very, okay, it's going to be a very tasty session today then. So welcome guys to our channel once again. Now, as I've said, we are going to focus on software engineering with a bit of focus rather on people, the processes therein, then the systems as a whole. And I'll start by mentioning locally here in Kenya, we've had systems like Huduma Number. We've had systems like the Social Health Insurance Fund, the SHIF-SHA system. We've had systems, for example, the ones that were targeting learners in the DLP or the digital learning platform, the program of distributing laptops. But again, you look at it and wonder, why do such systems flop? And one of the things we are going to look at today is, why does this happen and how can we go about it? So this is a very good session for product managers, techies, IT managers, those who are in management, and those who are interested generally in tech. Again, if this is new to you, it is also a good session for you because you'll be learning quite a number of things. So I'll start off with Noel. I don't know, Noel, just as a brief background, have you worked with systems at one point that flopped in your IT career?
Yeah, not fully though, not flopping fully, but at least partly. It so happens. I think it's, of course, looking at a platform very ambitious. You have all the needs, especially with the users. Then, of course, you're following up with of course, the stakeholders. These are the managers. And at times, managers usually want a system that is going to benefit them, but is not. It doesn't benefit the actual users. So it's not because of the technology per se, but because of how rollout is usually overlooked in human realities. Of course, getting it from you, technology doesn't fail people. Yeah, people and processes fail technology. Yes, it has happened. There is this time we developed a whole case management system. I was in charge of quite a number of modules inside there. From the complaints, we have the legal. Some of the modules flopped. Reason being, it didn't touch on what the actual users really wanted. So, answering your question, yes, it has ever happened.
Okay, that is very good to hear from you, Noel, especially with your expertise in terms of system development. Before I go to Gladys, I'll want to show, or rather present, some of the systems that we've had here in Kenya, just as a brief of it before we move to Gladys. Just allow me to share my screen. So as I do that, for those who are joining us, remember, I had mentioned, if you have a question, the chat box is there with us already. So what I'm going to present to you right now is some of the systems in Kenya that have failed, and we want to build our focus around these systems, just trying to identify why then do we have systems failing, including the recent e-procurement system, and not failing as such, but at least the vision or the goal of having the system wasn't met for one reason or the other. So, okay. So there we go. Now, we had Huduma Number at one point in Kenya. And this was a national digital ID initiative that was launched under the Kenyan government. Later on, it was declared illegal by the High Court of Kenya because it conflicted with the Data Protection Act, lack of sufficient public consultation, sensitization, and many felt it posed privacy risks. Second to it, we also have the digital literacy project, the DLP, which entailed distribution of projects rather tablets, digital tools to primary schools, e-learning in public institutions. Again, the reason why people rejected or it faced resistance was multiple issues like lack of internet and power in many schools, teachers not equipped, devices sometimes faulty, procurement corruption, insufficient support and maintenance, and many schools didn't use the devices. Okay. In Kenya, we also had digital villages or the Pasha centers. So this was targeting the rural areas. And one of the problem of that particular initiative was heavy licensing, regulatory costs, little or no support from the government. Many centers were struggling in terms of making profit, and also entrepreneurs were also struggling to service the loans. We also had local barriers and obstacles. Now, we have very many other systems, but the most common that most of us can relate to is SHA. SHA is replacing the former NHIF, the National Health Insurance Fund, in terms of the claims, pre-authorization, facility registration, and every other thing. Now, the problem with SHA, as this is public information, we realize many facilities are struggling to register or adapt the systems. We're also having delays in terms of the portal, the performance. We are having claims being rejected, and a lot of legitimate reasons. So when we come to such forums as software engineers or product managers and designers, I don't know, Gladys, through your experience in the health spaces, what would be your general comment on the systems that I've just mentioned? Just a general comment before we get into the details.
So I think, in my opinion, number one, the misconception is usually that we didn't have good developers on that. So for me, that would be the comment that I would make. It's a misconception that always comes up when we hear about such systems, and I think it's something to explore in our discussion as we move forward.
Okay, Gladys, thank you for that. So, Noel, we have three things to talk about. Number one is the people. In your experience, Noel, as a techie,
Yeah.
in terms of the people you've worked with, their behavior, their trust, their digital literacy, how would you comment about how that affects the adoption of such systems?
So two things here. One of them being resistance, of which that usually comes directly. The other one is about training on the other side after implementation. So now we've implemented a system, and there's a resistance that is faced by this technology. So resistance is much more of the people than technology. It's about how it's introduced. If users aren't consulted, they're not well consulted, or the sensitization to the users is not that clear, they're not well trained or shown the value of what this system is going to help them achieve, or automatically that is rejection that we're waiting. Whatever you mentioned in Kenya, the SHA, the Huduma number, both of them faced a pushback because users felt excluded. Yeah, the direct users were excluded from the actual system, and the system was, let's say, pushed forcibly into being in use rather than getting the users to adopt it. It brought a lot of confusion, and in the long run, the rejection that came in. So it's important to build that trust and that clarity. which that trust and clarity with users for them to be able to understand what these systems are for and what are we trying to achieve, and make it clear to the users. I think that is the most essential. That is the most essential aspect as you're looking at systems. That is.
Okay. That is very important, Noel, about trust. Gladys, I don't know, for now that you are a product designer and a product manager as well, have you experienced stories from users where they were, quote unquote, complaining about a certain system or about a certain product in the market? And possibly if you could give an example of that if you've encountered.
Okay. I think that is a common phenomenon as long as tech systems are considered. So in my day-to-day, I do experience that. So of course, I'm not going to be more precise about the specific product because some of these are internal things. But I have encountered on my day-to-day in my interactions, the moment I tell somebody where I work and they start complaining about a product that we have or a feature that we have either on Equity Mobile or Equity Online. And it's one of those things that for me, I do really find to be constructive, because it's good to know that whatever I am building actually does make sense to someone or it doesn't make sense. And so that I can be able to know how then do I pick this feedback and use it to refine my product. Or if it's not my feature, I'm able to share that with the relevant, the relevant business person or product manager on that feature. Um, on more general products, I think one of the systems I know we've built before, I've been able to build before, is an ERP system. And I think the feedback we get sometimes from some of the users is that they would love to have a simpler or more intuitive user flow. And it's one of those things that for me it triggered rather my interest in product design, because as a developer you tend to understand how to build a system, but then the moment you go into user experience you start realizing that a decision that you make is really going to affect a user and ensure and make them frustrated and not use your product. So for me, there's a general product that I've built before, and then there's also the day-to-day products that I build at Equity, and I think I do get to use that feedback constructively. Of course, no one likes to hear criticism, but for me, I don't take it that way, because at the end of the day, I want to detach from what I'm building and be able to ensure that it gets used, because that was the main intent. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I know such big organizations, of course, we would have complaints once in a while, but it is okay. No, when it comes to communicating change to users, Noel, I don't know which is the best approach according to experience, or at least something in terms of the approaches you've used that actually worked when it came to communicating change to the users so that they don't feel ignored. Yes.
That's a good one, because I like the way Gladys has placed it in terms of when users come to complain and there's a change that needs to be implemented. So what are the best ways? I think it is just meeting. Of course, there's empathy involved, getting to understand what is the actual problem directly from users before you even get to understand how the system, that particular change can be implemented. There's a whole process, especially in project management, about change management, how change is picked directly from the users who are using the system all the way to being implemented. There are quite a number of approvals. Get to understand if it is a need or it is something that is a small thing that has a smaller impact, that is in terms of the system. The other changes that are usually very big it can affect the whole processes. But basically, it's one-on-one that I mentioned about that clarity. It comes with the transparency as well, with the direct users, with the actual users. Have them included in these discussions. Get them to understand what is going to change, what is the effect of this particular change on their side. They are going to, at least it is an open discussion, rather than just sending emails or using the management to impose a change, or rather to impose a solution. Users usually need to know what they usually want to know what is this impact that comes in whenever a change is requested. What are the benefits? The benefits need to be clear from the implementers and to the users, as well as users usually want to feel heard. So whenever you include them, whenever you put them into this change that you are coming up with, it is usually important to bring them, at least bring them, have that open discussion, and make it clear to them what this particular change is coming into the solution. So I'd say much more of empathy, spend time with the users, and understand their pain points.
Thank you, Noel. It's very key, especially what you mentioned about empathy, and again, understanding the users, involving them, and also making them heard or seen. But I don't know, Gladys, if we also look at it from a product management perspective, sometimes they say the user is always right. Is it true that the user is always right from your experience?
This is like the synonymous phrase of the customer is always right, but there is always a but to it. However, customer feedback is very important. Like I said, building a product and then not having it get used. So if you're building something and then it doesn't meet the initial intent, then that is a waste of resources. So it's again, like Noel said, it starts with understanding the customer. But then I would love to add that even now in the product management space, we also look at how do you let me say, how do you do the product marketing? Now this is where we come about with, like go to market strategies on, and they in an effective manner, because you would like to like you said, if you build, like I would give an example, if we roll out a feature today, I would love customers to be aware that it exists. I do not want customers to get into the application and then realize that something changed overnight. Of course, you know how much drama that can bring. We know the synonymous. There's just recently. I don't know if it is okay to quote companies here, but our green friends, they did a whole app revamp, and of course everyone was not happy. Okay, not everyone, most people are not happy, others were happy. And it's not that the application was not working. It's again, customer, you don't want to bombard customers with so much change. And that is now where again I'll come back and say the go-to-market strategy really does matter. We have to ensure we do like promotions and reminding customers and doing a lot of SMS, so that customers can be aware of these changes, so that when they start using these applications, they are aware that this has changed, this user flow has changed, and I might need to have that mental model to realize that something has changed. So that's something for me to add. Customer is not always right, but their input does matter.
Okay. Now, when we talk about the customer not always being right, and I'd want Noel, for you to comment about this particular thing. Yesterday, I got a chance to attend a certain expo, or rather summit. It's known as the World Health Expo, being done within the healthcare space. So the 2025 conference. And one of the things that came up, and I really think this is something that is very critical, is co-creation, and by this we mean creating with the system and not for the system. And an explanation of this would be an example of software products or digital products that are built for specific users by developers and product managers coming together and thinking that this is what these people would need. And we build that for them, then give it to them. I'd want you to comment about this, Noel. Where does user involvement come in? Is it in terms of coming up with products? Because nowadays we have the internet, we have artificial intelligence, we have every other thing. We can come up with products that can fit a certain community. But where does user involvement now come in? And especially training and onboarding. Where should we start in the right way?
Involvement of users. I think it is just a continuation of what I was mentioning about users wanting to feel heard. They want at least what they're mentioning, what they really want to be implemented to actually solve their real problems. Two sides to this is first of all the implementers, and the other side is on the users. So sometimes we as implementers, of which I'm guilty to that, is sometimes we take policy boxes just to make sure that hey, this is what you want, you just take it, then all the way do the implementation. But when users communicate, they are talking about the actual problems. These are my real problems. These are what I really want to be digitized. So when the implementers totally understand or fully understand what users want, that is where now users come in. That is where we ensure that these structures are well placed. And moving forward to a sustainable solution in the long run is now bringing in the users for training, making changes in the system, and even involving them in the upgrades. Let them know that these are what has changed. You mentioned about co-designing, or rather designing with the users. If I got you right, it means designing systems that can adapt to the changing needs and environments of these users. Of these users, when of course with my experience when developing, or rather when coming up or when discussing with users the number of issues or the problems they are facing, of course most of them usually think in a manual way, or if not manual, it is according to how they understand the processes. So how do we convert that into digitizing it, into putting it into a system, really matters, and involving the users full scale in order for them to understand the process of these changes that come in, and are now involving them, make them feel or rather see the clear benefits of the changes that you brought in. It's much more of inclusion, I'd say. Working with them.
Oh, okay. Thanks for that, Noel. So we are all agreeing that stakeholder participation is very critical, so that the people would feel more involved in the system or the projects that we are doing, rather than having the system being imposed on us. So co-design. Thank you so much for those inputs around users. Let's talk about a little bit of the processes, and I'd want us to look at how we approach system design, and also the digital products that we come up with. And I'd love to hear from Gladys, especially when it comes to the mismatch between the project design and the local context. it is very true that most of the products in the market sometimes tend to ignore the local context or the Kenyan way of doing things, not particularly because it's good for everyone, but majorly because it is suitable for Kenya. I don't know, Gladys, with your experience as a product manager, how would we go about matching the project design and the local context here in Kenya?
With the grass for that. So I think number one, it has to do. It's first an issue of research. And it's one of the most. In fact, it's the core of every project. By the time you're trying to build any feature, I think the first place you have to start with is with the research. And by this, it means you're able to talk to your customers or the people that you're trying to build for and understand what really are their problems or the needs that they have. And in that way, you're able to pick certain nuances that they may not be able to articulate explicitly. So, and this is why I was saying that customer is not always right, but sometimes, not even sometimes, but their needs do matter because they may be saying out loud that this is the feature that I want, but in essence, they are trying to solve a specific problem. So, for starters, is now performing the research and working hand in hand with your customers to be able to understand what they want. And then I think the next thing we'd start looking at is how do you how again how do you map like Noel mentioned something critical, so how do you map the mental model to what to what you want to be the digital process. So essentially you do not want to build something that is far off from how the customer does it on a day to day. So essentially you want to mimic how they do a process. So for instance, if I was and that is what we do. um, Most of the products that we build online for the bank, we try to mimic what the customer does on a day to day while they are at either the branch level or what they will do with any other financial provider. So essentially, I would think of if you're trying to send money, I'm not going to try and change so much of the user journey because there is how you've thought about it. So now this is when we come and sit down as stakeholders. We try to mimic much of what you do. And you've mentioned Kenya, but there's also the concept of beyond Kenya, what happens. There are so many things about different countries that you never know, and that is why research is so important. You really do have to sit with your users and understand what exactly are their problems, because I may be able to understand what Kenya does. How do we handle a basic payment? How do we buy, let's say, goods? How do you pay to till? Basic things like those. I understand the Kenyan context, but if I was to take the same product and put it in a different market, of course there's going to be a context mismatch because these people have different regulations. So that is another thing that you have to understand as you build for your customers. You try to understand again, if it is Kenya, I understand the regulations within Kenya. So what is expected by the government, what is expected by, let's say, the data protection office, what is expected by the constitution, because I mean those are things you have to consider. But if I move my product from Kenya to another country, I now have to understand that country's regulations, how do they look like, and try to match what I'm building with what is existing. So for instance, if it's credentials in Kenya we use something like an ID. In a different country you find they use a passport, and such small nuances are things you really have to pay attention to. um but on the overall though, I would say there is also, once you've built your product, before you roll it out to production, so before it goes live, before customers are using it, this is why we do testing. The bit about testing is because you're trying to ensure it meets what you are trying to build for. again, you want to avoid context mismatch. And by testing earlier, either you're doing better testing at the development level, you're doing either what we call the user acceptance. You're also doing pilot testing with like a group of users who are like either it could be the actual users and they have like a sandbox or like that, like rather a specific whitelisted environment where somebody is handling those tests, and they look at things like business rules. They look at what we've said are the regulations of the country. By the time you're rolling this product, at least you will have been able to gather where did I fail as a product manager? Where did we fail as the business? Did we really understand what the users wanted? And I think essentially, if you try to do those few things that I've articulated, you'd even if you are not in a corporate or more in a defined environment and you are building your own product, because I mean nowadays we have the capability of vibe coding, building with AI and all that, so you can be able to build your own product without essentially being a huge organization. If you're able to follow those same steps, you'd arrive at what we call a minimum viable product or an MVP and be able to achieve a product that actually meets user needs. For me, that is how I would look at it.
Great. Thank you for articulating those very important. Yes, yeah, I have seen that. Thank you for that, Gladys. And I'm grateful that you're giving out your references using examples, and you've also expanded the context to even an international one or a specific country outside Kenya. Of course, when it comes to the processes, Noel, one of the things is feedback. What is the best approach to take feedback from users, Noel, with your experience?
Well, I agree with, totally agree with Gladys. So, in terms of feedback, there's what we call the embedded feedback loops that you allow users to report issues directly from the system. I think there is a quote that says, the moment you have an approval, of an issue, say a change in the system. If your process requires 5 signatures and 2 physical files, yeah, there are several signatures that you have to tick, and a physical file. A digital system won't save you. It will just digitize the pain. So it actually the pain that is actually there is increases more, but it is being transferred to a digital platform. So allow users to report directly using from the system. So we have access to this system. How can they report directly? At least there are screenshots that can be taken directly. There are real-time problems that usually come, real-time issues that come. And then when you get these issues, schedule regular reviews, with the users, with the direct users who actually use the system to adapt to the processes based on real world use. I think with my experience, I'd say from the case management, I think I've built quite a number of solutions. We have the case management that I built for a government institution, as well as an NGO. Part of the NGO, there's an application process. There's an application management system that gets applications from the system, from SMEs, and then there's a funding model for these SMEs. They used to face problems, issues, most of them, of course, were passwords, how they can get back to the system. Most of them were locked out, were locked out due to policies and regulations in terms of using the systems. But these were screenshots that were sent directly from the system, integrating it with quite a number of tools. You can integrate it with WhatsApp so that you get the issues directly, get emails directly from the system whenever they face issues. And right now, we usually have chatbots that you can integrate with the system. That is how you can get issues directly from the system. And from there, you reach out to these users who are facing the problems, instead of having the whole process to some other approver in order to implement the change. It is something that you get in terms of real world use and solve it and communicate back to the user who faced this problem. Basically, digital transformation isn't just about new tools. It's not. We're not bringing in new tools. We're not inventing new tools. It's about new ways of working. So how can we work in a new way to solve these issues and get the feedback?
Interesting. So Noel, you've talked about feedback when it comes to embedding feedback directly into the system, which is a very core thing. And as a rider to that, Gladys, as you respond to this, sometimes it becomes hard to give feedback in a system where we don't even trust whether the feedback would be handled or not. Of course, that becomes another issue of trust and every other thing. But sometimes people or the users of systems, they have trust issues because of privacy concerns. And when we were starting off, we looked at the Huduma Number digital identity project. And I'm using this specific scenario because it is public information that is available. And it was declared illegal by the High Court. I don't know, Gladys, what would be your general comment on privacy and policy regulation, especially when it comes to users and their rights and everything that entails their data?
I think number one, before you build any system, data protection should always be the first consideration. And it's always the simple things that people always assume, like as basic as your ID number. That is quite sensitive. So data protection is always, always, always the first conversation we need to have as you try to build any system. And that is trying to address, that through, like technical infrastructure. So for instance, it would make you realize from the very start that you do not have that capability. And so it's a consideration or a cost that you need to have. And then the second thing would be, again, what are the frameworks or rather the regulatory frameworks around those systems? Because the only reason why people, besides just the digital trust, which has to do with data, the other concern is at the end of it all, if such a thing were to happen where my data is leaked, how do I go about this? How do I sue the government? Those are not things that are pretty easy for anyone to do. So having a clear data protection, framework and also the regulatory framework around how to pursue legal issues concerning such systems. So I think that is where the digital, the lack of trust begins from. I didn't get your second question, Douglas.
Now, my second question would be your general comment, because this is an issue that privacy leads to situations where a system can be rejected in totality, or you can face resistance because of that. So then how do we go from this particular point now that we've already learned that this is an issue? What do we do from there?
Okay. So essentially, I think first it will be the concern around if you're able to meet those two things that I've said. If the government, because these are government systems in this instance, but if it were an organization building, if you're able to meet those two things, you're able to cover your data, you're able to have a clear data policy, and especially if you're doing data sharing, especially for organizations where you have to integrate with other systems. So for instance, banks, we do a lot of data integration with say telcos, and there's a lot of sharing of data around that. There's clear data sharing agreements, so that and the regulatory framework. But then also, as a general comment, I think sensitization would also work. When people just have suspicion, and maybe, just maybe, the system is fine, It is just that people do not understand because this is not something new. So, for instance, the Huduma number, you'd have to first convince me, why do you need me to move from a physical ID to a digital ID? Remember, this was not a time. I think right now everyone is really embracing a lot of tech stuff. I mean, everyone is on. There's a lot of there's good smartphone coverage. Everyone is on TikTok. Everyone at least has a grasp. Most people do have a grasp of what AI is. So we are really embracing tech in Kenya. But I would like to look at it from the point of a few years ago that was not the case. And so the government should have, or if right now they would try to replicate this model again, they would have to try and sensitize people and help them understand what it is that they're really trying to get people into. So having that sensitization, and the question again would be, who is sensitizing you? Because if it's you, Douglas, who's sensitizing me, I'm more likely to trust you because you're a tech person, you understand what you're saying, or Noel because they are building these systems. Or I would trust a celebrity who I know, but if it's a government blogger, of course you get there is the source of who is championing this sensitization. So sensitization would work to help us understand better the types of systems that the government is building, or systems that people are building, and there are certain concerns around digital trust. That is it for me.
Wow, that is very, very comprehensive. So depending on who, and also the kind of mobilization that you do and sensitization, that informs a lot. I don't know, Noel, if you have any comment on privacy, as you also talk about the gaps in the infrastructure, because most of the time we assume the systems you are building, they'll be used by people who have access to internet, they have access to reliable power in the rural areas or undeserved areas. So at the end of the day, we do good systems, but ignore infrastructure. So you can also respond to that as you respond to the gaps in infrastructure and how they affect the system uptake.
For sure. And then I think Gladys mentioned about trust. And data is how data is handled is usually very critical. It's very, very crucial in systems. So no matter how well a system is built, if people don't trust how their data is handled, how their data is being managed, they won't trust the system, and that will lead into automatic failure of the system. So sometimes from quite a number of examples that we can see here in Kenya, we can be able to identify some of the privacy concerns that have that are stopped good systems. Yeah, so systems can be good, but now just a matter of trust. And just to top it up on what Gladys mentioned is about legal experts as well. We have quite a number of legal experts here in Kenya. You can approach any legal expert for you to understand how the data can be handled, and as well as how clients are going to perceive these. You've mentioned about the transparency, get to involve the users, get to involve the public as well, and for you to implement a system. Matters you mentioned about infrastructure gaps that are available here in Kenya. I think some of the Kenyan examples, what you mentioned was digital literacy project, and as well as digital villages where they wanted at least some hubs in each constituency, and some of the issues that are faced, for example, with the DLP. Digital literacy project. These were tablets were being supplied to rural areas to make sure that all the students have adopted technology all the way from primary schools. I used to see quite a number of tablets, even back in my village, there in Baringo. I wonder where they went. Of course, these are marginalized areas where there is. When there was implementation, they failed to understand where these technologies going, they needed power, they needed internet, they needed support, they needed maintenance of this support. How to transfer this infrastructure was a big, brought in a very big gap, which many regions, especially where I come from, I'll mention Baringo. Part of the marginalized areas do not have power, do not have internet, or have low access of internet. How then is technology going to get into these students and even schools? This leads to poor performance or complete inaccessibility. So what is the urge of having this laptop, this tablet? Well, I cannot power it up. I cannot even access the internet, which means it's going to be a toy. So those are the problems that that are infrastructural gaps, or rather that technology face in terms of infrastructural gaps, as you've asked me. So basically, a system that can't reach the people. This is a system well built, well thought, and the whole process was clear. Now implementing it became a problem. It's meant to serve, but it's already failing. It's meant to really serve a greater goal, but it's already failing. A system that can't reach the people, it's meant to serve. The people it's meant to serve, it's already failing. So what is the strategy of bridging this gap? So first of all, at least get to understand what this technology is meant for. Get to have a clear goal. For matters like the examples that I've mentioned about the digital villages as well as the DLP, digital literacy project. First of all, design a low bandwidth or even systems that are offline use. You can use applications. You can use quite a number of technology that have been invested. Invest in infrastructure alongside digital tools as well. So, what are these infrastructure that we have as well as digital tools? The other thing that is so big is partnering with local providers. If it is maintenance on these tablets that needs to be fixed, how well can it get to those? How well can it get to those students or pupils who have these tablets? So of course, there are quite a number of local providers wherever you go. You go to Nakuru, you go to Baringo. There are quite a number of people who understand how to fix these. They can train them. They can even bring them up to speed for them to maintain these laptops. And in the long run, it is a delivery that is being done in quite a successful manner.
Wow, I've really learned a lot from that particular perspective, Noel, about partnering with local providers already, how to go about maintenance, how to build with such things in mind. Thank you so much for those insights. I'd love to ask Gladys about a PM's or a product manager's perspective when it comes to doing or coming up with products targeting such areas. I don't know how you approach such kind of things, but again, as we also move towards the end of our session, Gladys, as you mentioned that when it comes to funding of projects, many projects are underfunded or sometimes get delays in funding, or they are recurring costs that aren't planned for. So we find this leads to delays, incomplete rollouts, or even delays after launch. Over to you, Gladys. You can first respond if you have anything around infrastructure and how you go about it. But again, majorly responding about financing and funding. And I'm having this in mind that you also work in a financial institution that is sort of Pan-African. You can also comment about that with your experience within a financial institution. Over to you, Gladys.
Okay. Thanks, Douglas. So on the issue of let me start with the second concern on funding. So I think this varies with the type of organization, and also if you're building alone, because like I mentioned again, I do understand that people are building startups, one or two people, so the funding model will be different. So what happens normally in corporates is there's a full-on budget for the whole project, including the building costs, so what we may call the capital expenditure, and then the operational costs, which is post deployment, which includes things like hosting, if you might need to keep on, having changes, recurring changes, and you might need to keep on building on that. So for at the very start of a project, that is fully factored in. And now this is where we bring in experts who handle commercials, and they look at the overall, including do you need develop how many developers might you need? Of course, there's a constant change. There's a constant number of figure around that. They look at that. They look at what type of infrastructure will we use, how many systems are in scope. So that would affect the budget in a massive way if you're integrating with several systems. If it's a vendor, how much of this cost is the vendor carrying, and how much are we carrying? So for big organizations, I know budgeting or funding is not usually a problem. Actually, what is usually a problem is convincing your stakeholders, or rather the people who are uh, helping you buy this product. So your business, essentially convincing them that I want a couple of millions to be able to build this project. That is usually the biggest challenge in big organizations. So in the case of smaller organizations, so this I'm looking at even startups, most of them tend to have a model where they tend to do vendor. So they are the provider of services to other organizations. So somebody else, so if it were equity, equity is Equity has is partnering with a startup, and the startup is um offsetting that cost to Equity Bank. Okay, so somebody else bears the cost. So this is where now internally as Equity we will look at the startup as a vendor. So most models around financing look at that. Of course, they do have a prior budget, but in such organizations, the best model would be to try and partner with another organization who can be able to carry that cost until to a point where you're able to meet the upfront budget. So basically, as I state that we have the capital and the operating cost. Then the third thing I would look at when it comes to funding is and I think maybe Noel would be able to shed more light on this because he's an entrepreneur in tech. So I know there is the venture capital where somebody else either gets equity in your company, or they buy of shares, and there's a certain there's a certain financial model you work with, and then you get to build your product, and there's a way you get to pay them out. So it will depend with the organization. But one of the things I think, or rather, if I want to shift this conversation, I would say before building any product, it's very important to understand how much of this cost are you going to incur, or are you going to be able to incur, because you don't want to build. And this is the case with even all these projects that you've mentioned. One of the irregularities with them is underfunding. So there's a budget, but for some odd reason, the budget does not actually support the project. We start building, we go live, and then the product is out there, and the citizens of Kenya are using the product, and then for some reason the product crashes, so your website is crashing, and you find that it's an issue with your hosting. There is no maintenance cost for that. So the catch with government projects is on the underfunding. So maybe that's a concern. And even most tech projects, if you are not able to understand how much of your operating costs you're going to bear after you have built the product, then you're more likely to fail. On the concern around building in areas where possibly there is poor infrastructure, if I have understood the question, or where there's an infrastructure gap, um, I think in my case, we look at the different subsidiaries that we build for. So if I'm saying a country like Kenya is tech savvy, there's a different country, say South Sudan or DRC, which parts of which do not have like proper network connectivity. So when we build our products, we try to vary. So instead of just building or putting a feature on, say, the mobile app, where some people may not be able to access that, and it is a critical feature that can be supported using other means. We try to go with, let's say, the USSD version. So this is where somebody dials star something code and then hash, and so to enable to meet that mobile internet connectivity issue. So such those are the types of concerns that we try to look in the different for us. We look at it from a subsidiary level or a country level, because again, as you said, it's a pan-African or rather a multinational organization. So those are the things we look at. And then we also look at issues around, say, even the infrastructure. So the infrastructure here, meaning the roads and things like that. So the reason why we try to digitize most of our products is so that the person who has no capability of reaching a branch. So probably it will take you an hour, 2 hours to get to a branch. Instead of putting you through that task, we try and replicate the process on our digital platforms. For us, so those are the types of ways we look at. So basically the mobile network access and also the infrastructure in general. So especially for rural areas. That will be my comment around that. And maybe I would allow Noel to also expound a bit on what I was talking about, venture capital, or if he's able to go ahead and do so.
Yeah, well, thank you, Gladys. You mentioned really something really, really good about venture capital and getting shares from, of course, investors. We are not yet there. We are not yet there. Hopefully, we're going to get there. I think I'm following one of the politicians who usually talks about venture capitals and how to profit, how to even bring in investors. Yes, of course, quite a number of projects are underfunded. So some of them are usually delayed, as well as getting these recurrent budgets in terms of it can be a government project, it can be an individual project as well. But what is the strategy? What is the strategy? But before I go to the strategy, there's when a system without doesn't have a sustainability budget, because there needs to be a budget that is allocated. Sometimes it ends up being a short-term experiment. Instead of having the whole full system being implemented, you realize it is just an experiment that is going to run for a short while and then it dies. So there is what we call the phased rollouts. It can be break down the project into quite a number of phases, and then do manage resources according to the budget, according to the phased rollouts. You can face it in terms of days or rather duration, or you face it according to modules, or what is the strategy that you have depending. And once that is broken down, you can be able to manage the resources better. I think that is my understanding on or how you can be able to manage the funding. I thank you for that, Gladys.
Interesting conversations there around funding. Yeah, and the question remains, for every digital product that we build, who is going to pay for the solution beyond the pilot phase or the first phases, as Noel is talking about? Would the product or the solution work for itself on scaling, or would we have to work for that product? So thanks for those highlights around funding. As we come to an end, I'd just love us to focus a little bit on systems, and this entails the technical aspect of creating systems. So we've looked at those systems, maybe because of over-engineering, as some would say, or sometimes lack of offline capability. Sometimes it's because of weak UX design or UI interfaces. Sometimes it's poor data integration or the lack of having that system in sort of APIs to communicate with one another. Noel, because you are a systems architect, I don't know what would be your overall comment on the technical aspects of systems, which again now either work for the good of the system, or sometimes when ignored, they lead to systems failing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make it brief. It's basically because we're working on systems, and systems are basically softwares. So before you make any investment on software, first understand, or rather invest much more in the process clarity. And when the process is clear, then coming to the software, it's much more easier. Before you come into any automation, first of all, simplify the process. Break down the processes. Is it really clear? Starting from the process, then you simplify. And before you launch, listen, because the best systems are built on workflows that make sense to the people who use them. That is a brief from my side.
Douglas, I don't know if you're speaking, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Gladys,
Mm.
I was asking a question. Of course, I've heard what Noel has said, and thank you, Noel, for that particular input. Specifically for you, Gladys, do you have a comment around UX and UI? Because I know you also somewhat have a background on that. Do you have these specific things that we tend to ignore that actually work against the systems that we are building from the technical aspect?
Okay, that's an interesting one. But I think I will go with what Noel says, because process analysts work hand in hand with UX teams in most organizations, so they borrow from each other a lot. But there's the general concept around KISS: keep it simple, stupid. So that is always my go-to strategy, even for the systems that we're building. Every single time I look at a flow or a process, I tend to think about it in, if I did not have any idea of tech, how would I use this? So, and essentially, that's the same way you also want to build. You build it with the simplest, with the user who has lowest digital literacy in mind, instead of you as a technical person. For me, that's the framework I would go with in a simple way.
Okay. Thanks, guys, for those particular, I'd say, bits of or pieces of information that work for our good. And at this particular point, I'd also love to really appreciate the kind of support that we get from our online community, and also for the things that they are able to help us achieve, and the feedback that we get to customize our sessions. So if they have any questions, they can leave them in the chat box as we come to an end. So I'd give Noel and Gladys a chance to give us their summary about some of the things we've talked about, or the things that you feel, maybe this can be handled better, because we are looking at software engineering and we want to know how can we then build sustainable solutions, how can we involve users, how can we take into consideration the technical aspects of coming up with software. So if Noel, you can go first, or Gladys, whoever is ready, then we usher in the session of the questions, because I have some here as we wrap up. Thank you.
Just as you said, let me begin. And Thank you for this session. And it's really, even as much as I am discussing this, it's something that I'm realizing how systems need to. It's always a learning period, and systems actually fail, not once, not twice, several times, and most of the times it's really just because the software is a problem. We've talked about the processes, we've talked about the people as well. It's about trust. It's about let the users trust this system in terms of even governance, in terms of their data. That is, let them understand through training. Take them bit by bit to be able to understand what is their catch in this system. The infrastructure that is already placed, that is put in place, is really important as well, and integrity. I've mentioned about data integrity as well. If we want digital transformation, if we want a transformation of our digital space to succeed, we must be real with ourselves. We must really design from the point of reality, and not just because you can think of a system and want to implement a system. That is an ambition. It's not one-sided. Let's be real about implementing systems that work, systems that are going to transform our digital space and succeed, not just ambition. Over to you, Gladys.
Thank you, Noel, for that. So I'd start with people. At the beginning I said that the moment we hear a system has failed, especially a government project, the first thought is they probably didn't hire experienced developers. That is not the case. Sometimes you have the best developers on the project. It's just a question of what frameworks do we have, like I said, around data protection and even regulatory frameworks, and even having what we are calling the sustainable budget. So that is around people. Number two around people would be curiosity. Again, we are reiterating the most important factor at the end of the day is building systems that align with what your user needs. So you can never ever build a product that does not make sense. So you have to be curious about who you're building for in the different contexts that they are in, and that means plenty of research. If you're able to do proper research, you're going to have an easier time while building, because you will have less iterations to work with once you start testing. And then again, co-creating with them, so trying to just meet them where they are. And of course, even when you build the product, you try to mimic what is on the ground. Of course, there is the concern around, for me now, in terms of systems, I would say if it's an issue of automation, the faster you do it, the better you're able to, to meet your chaos and just figure out what is wrong. But again, it also has to come with how much are you willing to risk to iterate or to try out new things. Because in as much as we are saying you have to stick to what your users want, if you're trying to innovate your systems, you have to be also curious beyond what users want and try to build something different. And that is where the chaos comes in, but you have to be willing to take that risk. And finally, around systems again is, we've gone live, here we are, what happens? We don't leave the product at that point. It's working okay, yes, but we need to keep on monitoring so that we can understand the performance and whether it's actually a viable product the moment it has gone to market. Those are my few comments around that, people, processes, and systems.
Wow, thank you. The questions are coming in as we talk, but because of time, we'll just handle a few of them. The rest, I know Noel and Gladys, you can be responding in the chat later this video. So there's just some question that has come in, but allow me to first start with this. And I think this would go to Noel, and also Gladys, if you can respond, because I know Noel is quite conversant with this. Not that I've ever worked with him on projects that entail agile methodology. Noel, how does I'm saying this with some sort of memory tied to something where you can almost get frustrated of the changing user needs. So one time you're building this, then the client changes their mind halfway, then you have to rework again through it. So how does one manage the changing user needs when working under agile methodology? Noel, then Gladys can also respond. Yeah.
Yeah, quite a number of times. I think there was an ERP I was working on, and or rather, I think we were a team, but part of it, part of the issues that came in was, of course, changing needs. We don't want these dashboards. We want dashboards that look like these. Of course, I know Gladys understands UI UX. With Microsoft products, you're given a platform. You're given a platform to develop and put everything into context and at least meet the requirements of the clients. Just using one platform, and sometimes UI UX can be rigid. It can be static. You have to work on what you have. And with Agile, it embraces change as core value. That is, in terms of understanding Agile methodology, it needs to embrace that change that comes in, unlike the traditional methods that resist changes. So with the traditional methods, at least Agile encourages flexibility to deliver customer value. That is. But several times I was faced with these issues that come in day in day out with issues. Of course, users facing these issues that they want one or two things. So how do you manage these changing needs? We've mentioned about people getting to understand as well the processes. So as much as you sit with the people, by people I mean the users or the stakeholders, as Douglas well puts it, is as long as you sit with them, get to understand what this process is. And of course, coming from a point of expertise, you need to understand what is a product, what are the capabilities of this product, and you can advise them to the best of your knowledge how the change is going to be implemented. Still work with people, work with the stakeholders to be able to manage. That is what I'd say.
All right. Thank you. So Gladys, if you have a comment on that, before I do the last question, then we call it an end.
Yeah, sure. From a product management perspective, I would say agility is good, but at the same time, it's always a concern when now we start having a scope creep, yeah. So new features start coming up, and you have a tough deadline to work with. So I think for me, one of the things I've come to learn is, as a PM, I have to be very, very, not gonna use the word strict, but very thorough, especially with maintaining my backlog or the features, or rather what I'm trying to prioritize. And most of the time, it's only if I really do have to have a clear evaluation of why I need that. I will incorporate that feature as we are trying to even close a deadline, and then a new feature comes in. So there is that backlog prioritization for from a PM perspective to avoid scope creep, and also being able to push back with your stakeholders. So most of the time, these concerns that you're trying to push back are always coming from the business side. So you'll find that you build something, but then business wants you to bring in something new, and it is because they feel it's a nice to have, not really a must have. It's a nice to have. So this is where you now tell them, okay, we can build the feature. It's not a complete no, but what we are going to do is we're going to do an MVP too. And what I'll do is I'll just document this change that you intend to have. And then we release what we have right now, and then in the next cycle we are going to release what you want, or incorporate what you want. So that is how I handle it from a PM perspective.
Okay, thank you for that. I really appreciate, because we are able to talk about things that affect us in different ways, as developers, as product managers, as IT managers, as entrepreneurs, and every other aspect in role that we play. There was that question, but I believe we've answered it in the session before, especially when it comes to balancing technical rollout. And Noel mentioned that about FIRST, because this was a question relating to public sector projects like the Kenya's e-procurement system. And FIRST rollout would be, I think, a way to go, as Noel has shared with us. Then on collaboration, Gladys has also insisted so much about working with the users, co-creation. So for the person who asked that, we've already handled that in the previous segment of the video. Otherwise, thank you everyone. We are very grateful for those who sacrificed their time. We've done almost 90 minutes of our session today, and it's been nothing but enlightening. I've learned quite a number of things, and to our guest speakers, we can't thank you enough for how much, in terms of impact, you've made to very many people today. This is also to appreciate the kind of support you have provided for the community. Noel, you've always been asking and checking around our videos, and also giving your input. And it's good to see you here today sharing with us. Gladys, this is your second time on the show. I know this is just the second time. You came one term, two term, then I know. Sijui zitaruka term ngapi. But asante sana kuwakilisha kila saa. And Noel, this is your one term, and we don't believe in one terms. So especially now that you mentioned you're from Baringo, I know you don't believe in such.
Not at all. I'm definitely going to be here again anytime you need me. It's a pleasure to have, or rather, to be in this platform. It's an opportunity. It's a learning opportunity for me as well. Thank you so much, Gladys, and Douglas. And you're doing a good job here. I usually watch what you're doing. Keep going on. I'm here with you. I'm in full support.
Thank you, Noel. So I'd give you a chance to do your parting shot. We start with Gladys, ladies first, then Noel. You can also talk about Dynasoft. I saw you're doing something, Dynacloud. I mean, Dynacloud Africa. Yeah, I don't know what that is, but in your parting shot, you can tell us and a little bit of it. Gladys, if you also have anything you're doing on your end, apart from the tasty foods that you also do, yeah, you can also let us know in terms of mentorship and every other thing. So over to you, Gladys.
Okay. Thank you so much, Douglas. It's always a pleasure being on your show. As always, I know I have said that like 1,001 times. I'm really grateful. I'm also grateful to Noel. It was quite a learning session. I have learned a lot, especially again, I told you on the technical side. I'm not a technical product manager, so I really always appreciate when I get into calls with more technical people, developers, and people like yourself, analysts, and I'm able to actually absorb much of that energy. And I tend to think, at the end of the day, we never stop learning. So for what I do, yes, I love cooking, but that is aside. What I really do enjoy doing is I write a lot on LinkedIn. I write a lot on product management. It's one of the, let me say, know what we'd call it, but it's one of the hobbies that I started off last year as trying to document my corporate journey, as well as sharing my product design journey, because it was something I was learning and I wanted to build in public. And then now it has transitioned to me talking about my product management experience and trying to help people who are transitioning into the tech space understand just basically what it takes. It's really not such a hard thing, but it requires you to put in effort. And sometimes you have to believe in yourself blindly. Like the Lulu is the Solulu. So that's what I write about. Recently, I started writing a Substack. I'm hoping to see how that goes. I mean, my LinkedIn is going great right now. I'm over like close to 10K followers, but the idea is building a community of tech people and being able to have, to be able to share insights like these on such a space where like everyone has access and it's free. I mean, like, yeah, so please connect with me on LinkedIn and hopefully you can learn more from me. Thank you.
Mm.
Okay. Thanks, Gladys. I know you're one of those few ladies whose face matches the content they do. So smart content, smart faces, and every other thing. So keep up. Noel, over to you.
Thank you. I was listening to Gladys and Delulu is the Sululu, and so and I'm proud of you with what you're building. Up to 10,000 followers, that's not easy, especially on LinkedIn. I'm also on LinkedIn, Noel Kipyegon. You can find me there. But today's conversation wasn't just about systems. It was more about people, because behind every fallout, every failed rollout, that is, because what we've talked about, especially in actual real cases here in Kenya, we miss an opportunity to listen, to empathize, and even to build with purpose. But this discussion, or rather this conversation, has brought that out well, and I thank you for that, Douglas. And as much as I'm the founder of DynaCloud Africa, here I don't believe we don't just deploy technology. We design transformation. We design transformation. As much as we are a startup, we just began the other day, not long ago. But we've implemented in enterprises. We've worked with the NGOs as well as our communities to ensure that digital solutions are usable, inclusive, and sustainable. How far do they go? How flexible they are? Personally, this work is more than professional. Is more than professional, because I'm an IT consultant, and that is the reason I came up with, or rather, we came up with DynaCloud Africa. It's not only professional for me. It's really personal. It's very personal. As a mentor and a believer, especially in Africa's potential, I'm committed to building systems that empower, not exclude, systems that serve, not just perform. So, as we leave this session, I invite you to rethink how we build. Let's stop blaming technology. Let's start redesigning processes, retraining people, and rebuilding that trust with people. Because when we align with people, processes, and systems, as we just discussed, as we just conversed, we don't just transform organization. We transform lives. We transform our lives generally. So thank you for that, Douglas.
Okay. Noel, about your company, I don't know, do you have specific target clients, possibly?
So target clients is any NGOs, especially NGOs. We have a government institution, because it's transformation of their manual processes to digital. I'm all rounded, but at least I'll focus on what we've implemented so far through at least case management users, or other institutions that require case management. We have NGOs that require their digitization of their system, especially with communicating with vendor capitals. We also have logistics as well. Those are at least what we have really focused on, clearing and forwarding solutions.
Okay. Thank you, Noel, for that. Thank you, Gladys. You can also paste your Substack, Gladys, your Substack link on the live chat. For those who are watching, you can get that Substack link from Gladys. Noel, you can also paste your LinkedIn profile on the chat box on the YouTube, as well as Gladys. And I believe very many people would be glad to connect with you Noel, on a side chat, I know you also deal with honey. So I think one of these fine days we can link up with you on the side chat.
Nimesikia tu chakula.
I know when I mentioned food, I awakened the senses of Gladys because
I
she's a
know.
foodie. Okay, Gladys, you can also reach out to Noel on honey. Anyway, so guys, that's it for our session today, and I'd love to end it at that point with my parting shot as well, and say this, that one, as we've all agreed, that technology doesn't fail people, it's the people and processes that fail technology. Again, every system is only as effective as the people who use it and the processes that sustain it. When we build with empathy, when we train with clarity and trust and support with consistency, we actually build systems that last. From us, allow me to thank you and appreciate you for your time. On behalf of our community, the Expert Bytes Learning Community, thank you so much to our two guests, and we hope to see you in our next session. Remember to also support us by subscribing to our channel and sharing it with your friends and helping us grow. So, Turus, bye-bye. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.